So it ended up being a 47-point margin in the end. The Lions kicking 9 final quarter goals to streak away to a big grand final win. But 47 points really doesn't tell you the story of what happened in this match. It was a lot closer than that margin suggests, Jake. So it was just about as close as any game could get.
And yet 47 might have flattered them. It was a bit of a weird scoreline.
But it was at halftime in particular, it was just about as close as any game could get. And I'm not just talking about the score, which was tied at 5-6, 36 each. Christian, there were a few other stats that were just very, very even at that point.
Yeah, so you talk the score being even. At halftime, the disposals were even. So both teams had 165 disposals each, but even breaking them between kicks and handballs, there was 103 kicks each for both of them and 62 handballs each for both of them. Clearances were the exact same number, 20 each. Centre bounce clearances was the same. Inside 50s, it was sort of +1 in Geelong's favour, so that sort of got out of whack. But yeah, just the sort of top-end key stats were very, very even across, for the first half.
And the start itself, I mean, it actually felt like both teams were a bit jittery, weren't playing the game on their terms as much as what they've been able to do throughout the season. The Lions had a season low, I think you said it was 9 uncontested marks in the first term. We've talked about the importance of their control ball and being able to take a lot of marks and being able to chip it and actually work the way methodically down the ground. The Cats just couldn't crack in and couldn't control the footy as much as they wanted around contest. It just felt like both teams were, sizing each other up, maybe a bit nervous on the big stage.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think with the Lions, obviously, they love to sort of chip it around and be patient with the ball almost. They sort of didn't even look to be in that mode in the first quarter. Yes, they sort of, only took 9 uncontested marks, the equal fewest, and it's a big part of how they play. But almost to me, and looking a little bit in hindsight now as well, looking at their first half, it was the way they dominated tackles and pressure on Geelong. So the game was, as you said, it was ball in hand. Both of them were sort of fudging it around a bit, not sort of looking as dynamic as always. But Brisbane's pressure factor was 196 in the first quarter, which is the 6th highest opening quarter since 2010, since pressure's been around. But the tackle differential of +11 was also, the 6th biggest that we've seen in an opening half of the quarter. So it was almost like they were able to bring the pressure and, brought more tackles and sort of brought the heat to sort of Geelong. Whereas Geelong weren't sort of bringing the defensive pressure to Brisbane. They had the great setup where they stopped them from taking marks and chipping the ball around. But it was almost like, I don't know, I feel like Brisbane, not toying with them, but in the first half just went, okay, finals footy is about pressure. Let's just focus on one key area. We're not going to get around our terms from quarter one. And it sort of broke Geelong's back by the end because you saw what happened in the third and fourth quarter when it sort of did get a run on. Brisbane was sort of able to almost release the shackles and go, okay, now we can forget about the pressure. And once we get a bit of scoreboard pressure, they were able to get the terms on their offensive, the offensive game plan and started taking 20, 22 uncontested marks per quarter in the second half. But yeah, it was almost like Brisbane had sort of, neither of them were looking at their best, but I think Brisbane were playing more of a final style of football in that first half than Geelong was, pressure-wise.
Well, that's what Chris Scott said in his press conference after the match, Jake. Just basically said that he didn't feel like he was, or his side was in control for most parts of that. So maybe that halftime margin, I mean, you talked about the actual final margin flattering them, but maybe even that halftime margin was sort of keeping the Cats in it for a bit.
Oh, absolutely. But even at halftime, just having a brief chat with a couple of people, it did feel like it's funny because you see all those numbers, and that was shown to me at halftime yesterday, but it did feel like Brisbane was on top in quite a few areas. It felt like they probably should have been in front. Did you expect the floodgates to open as they did? I probably didn't expect as much as they did, but yeah. What was your question?
Oh, I can't even remember. But we talked about the margin at halftime and then sort of how tight it was for that first half. It actually was quite tight for most of the third quarter as well. So with 3 minutes and 45 seconds left in that third term, it was a 1-point game.
It was.
And it took a guy named Charlie Cameron, who's probably not had his best season overall, to come in and play sort of that game breaker role, and he did it magnificently.
So Charlie Cameron's someone that we, not just us, but I think a few people are sort of saying, well, does he deserve his spot in the team throughout this year? He's had a very, very, very ordinary year. Averaged 6.6 rating points per game this year, which is pretty low. Well, he had 17 yesterday. I thought he was...
17.9.
17.9. We're going to get to in a minute, the Norm Smith voting. I thought he was just about the most important player on the ground for Brisbane in terms of the impact he had leading to the result of the game. You're right. The score was basically level. He comes in, he kicks 2 goals late in the third quarter, his second and third for the match, having kicked one in the second as well. But it was more than just the 2 goals. It was the pressure that he applied. And just looking at the numbers at the end of the game, sometimes the numbers don't kind of match up to what your eyes see. And I don't know if that's because, I don't know why that is, but it felt like he put on a hell of a lot more pressure than the 3 tackles and 11 pressure acts that were next to his name by the end of it. His pressure right from the opening minutes was great. You know, he lost his footing a couple of times. Probably, I don't know what was going on with his studs, but he was fantastic. He was running hard. He was chasing. He was putting in double, triple efforts a lot of the time, trying to keep the ball locked in. He ended up having, I think, 7 score involvements as well with his 4 goals. So he got those 2 late in the third quarter. Then Lachie Neale bangs one through to open up the mark to 19 points.
Yeah.
And then Cameron kicks a 4th 30 seconds into the last term. And I think it was Cameron, I'm not going to say
10-minute patch.
I'm not going to say single-handedly because it obviously wasn't, but I think Cameron was the main reason why a 4-goal gap appeared in that game in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, so you talk about his rating points. He had 9.5 rating points, 9.5 rating points in the third quarter alone, which would have been, by itself, that would have been his 7th best game for the season. So I put my hand up. I was probably saying 3 or 4
just that
weeks
quarter.
ago. Yeah, just that third quarter alone would have rated as, you know, the 7th best game. But I was the same. A few weeks ago, I was like, how long can you wait for Charlie Cameron to pull something special out? Because you know he can do it.
But it's just,
he hadn't been doing it all
waiting.
year. And
Yeah.
I was like, is he holding out someone else's spot? Is there someone else he can put in? That almost justifies waiting for him to come good.
In finals, you want your big name players, and he has the runs on the board over a significant period of time that suggests that he would be able to do that. But you would have looked at his stat line and his performance in the qualifying final 3 weeks earlier against the Cats. Same team, same venue.
Yeah.
He had 2 disposals. One of those was a goal, but that was, I think, really early in the match. Just didn't do much for anything after that. You wouldn't have been surprised if the Lions in that semi-final against the Suns would have gone, maybe we can look somewhere else and look to tweak that forward line a bit. And he might not have even played in the grand final. But they stuck fat. And he rewarded it. I mean, he wasn't the only one that bounced back from that qualifying final loss against the Cats. And by the way, JB raised this in the podcast last week, but that's now 5 out of 6 of the results that have been flipped in this current Final 8 system.
Yeah.
If a qualifying finalist meets in the grand final, the result's been flipped 5 out of 6 times. Hugh McCluggage was another one. Was absolutely blanketed in that qualifying final. Came out and probably was in the Lions, I don't know, maybe like top 4 or 5 players.
Easily
Today in the grand final.
26 and 4
Few
goals.
jump
I
time
know a
goals,
few of them came late, but gee, 26 and 4 goals. That's a massive grand final. What about Zach Bailey?
3 goals, 6. I mean,
3 goals. Has anyone ever finished a grand final with 3-6 next to their name?
No, so, well, it's champion data history. So going back to 99, we haven't seen anyone have 9 scoring shots in a grand final. So he's the first one to do that. But yeah, with Hugh McCluggage, I mean, the last quarter, he was the first player to ever have 10 plus disposals and 3 goals in a quarter. But just the second ever player...
Of a grand final?
In a grand final, yeah. And the second ever player to have 25 disposals and 4 goals in a grand final. Peter Bell did it in 99 for North Melbourne, which would have been the first grand final we covered. But yeah, they're the only 2 players that have reached those numbers.
Yes, that Lachie Neale goal was very important as well. We will touch on him a little bit later as well. But as you said, Jake, there were no Norm Smith medal votes at all for Charlie Cameron, despite his probably 15-minute patch, which helped win the game.
Yeah, so just going back to the order of proceedings. So, yeah, he kicks those 2 goals late in the third quarter, his second and third for the match.
Yep.
Neale then bangs one through. They're up by 19 points at three-quarter time. Then he comes out and kicks a 4th goal in seconds of the 4th quarter. And it feels at that point like, gee, Brisbane's going to win this game. He then has another shot about 5 minutes later, a snap from the pocket that he misses. Now, this is what I sort of was playing around in my head. If he kicks that goal, if that ball is a foot to the right and he kicks a 5th goal...
3 foot to the right.
2, also known as a metre. If he kicks that goal, does he get a 3 off everyone? Does he get a 3 off everyone in the voting if he kicks that goal? And
I thought if they've not given him any, I don't think
But why
one
not?
goal's going to get him up to 3. I don't know.
So he
You're
kicks
asking
5
hypotheticals.
He kicks 5 goals. He kicks 5 goals and 4 of them were literally created the entire gap that they won by. I reckon he might get a 3-2-2, 3-1 or something like that. But instead he misses it, and I just don't know how we were so results driven on one kick, and it's like it really made no difference in the grand scheme of things. I don't think that should have impacted anything. I'm telling you, if he kicks that goal, he's finishing out worse second in the Norm Smith. How he gets no votes is extraordinary to me. I want to give our Norm Smith votes.
Oh, okay. So you think they weren't good enough? You wouldn't have given it.
It's not that I don't think they were good enough. I just don't agree with them. But it's funny, you know. I'll mention the Brownlow again. Last time I promised. But if people love to criticise the Brownlow, say, "Oh, the umpires shouldn't be doing it." Why? Why not? Because no one gets it right. No one will ever agree on any set of voting that's ever done. So we all have our own idea of who was better, what is more valuable.
Yep.
So I don't think you can criticize and say it was wrong, but it's like, well, what's right?
Yep.
What right is what your opinion is.
Okay, well, what's right in your opinion?
If I was doing the voting, I would have given Charlie Cameron 3. I think Charlie Cameron was the reason they had the gap in the game. I think he was the most important player when the game was in the balance 50-50. I would have given Hugh McCluggage 2. Okay. I thought he built into the game. He was started slow but built into the game as it went on.
Yeah.
And I don't really subscribe to he got junk time goals. The game is still alive at that point, and he was the best player on the ground in the last quarter. And I would have given Ashcroft 1. I don't think Ashcroft winning it was an absolute travesty. I just think there were a couple of others that you could throw up that probably were as good, maybe slightly better.
You were giving out Norm Smith medal votes, 3, 2, 1. Christian, what are you going with?
I think I'm similar to how the umpires do it, whereas at the end of each quarter, I was thinking about, okay, who's in front of the Norm Smith, who's in front of the Norm Smith. For that sort of exercise for me, 3 votes to Will Ashcroft because I had him at the end of the first, second and third quarter thinking he's a chance to win it. I didn't really have McCluggage in there until...
When you do that exercise, are you rating every quarter in isolation or are you just adding on now to this?
Adding on. It's sort of, adding on now.
Yeah, okay.
More of, who was at the end of the first quarter, what names did I have and did anyone drop off or join him?
Yeah.
So I thought Will Ashcroft for 4-quarter performance was the 3 votes for me. Yeah, I'd give 2 to Charlie Cameron and 1 to McCluggage. 2
and 1 to McCluggage, okay. I would have gone 3 for Charlie Cameron. I agree with you. I think he turned the match in that.
So we've just given depending on what you do with Ashcroft, we've just given Charlie Cameron and all.
2 votes for Harris Andrews. I thought it was a really underrated game, and when the game was close, he was repelling Geelong's attacks brilliantly.
Hang on. Most defenders, you can't
win awards. Most intercepts on the ground, most intercept marks on the ground.
He was very
Leadership
good.
was awesome.
Yeah, no, I have no issue with.
And maybe I do like to throw him a bone because he's a defender and they always don't get these kind of awards, but I thought he was magnificent and I gave Ashcroft 1. So if we were to tally that up, Cameron gets 8 votes, Ashcroft gets 5 votes to come second, McCluggage gets 3 and Andrews gets 2.
And yet, look, I don't want to say that they got it wrong. That's fine. It is what it is. But it's like, it is a bit strange. I think we can all agree it's a bit strange that Charlie Cameron didn't get a single vote.
Yes.
That seems a bit
Still
odd
a worthy winner, Will Ashcroft. Now, second time he's won it, so he knows what to do in big games, obviously.
Oh, he was fantastic. Yeah.
Someone who wasn't in the Norm Smith votes as well was Lachie Neale. So he was the sub, but the Lions co-captain was inspirational and was...
Second time in his career he's been the grand final sub. Isn't that a funny one?
Probably one of the best halves of footy I think I've seen. So 17 disposals. He kicked that goal that we mentioned just on the stroke of three-quarter time from outside 50. I was worried about his calf when he kicked that, by the way. 7 clearances, including 6 in the final term when, well, yes, the Lions were running right, but he was providing those hard balls and those clearances which helped the Lions run right, if that makes sense. If you extrapolate his day out, he might as well be in the votes as well. So Lachie Neale was just magnificent. Christian, you've got some stats on him and Ashcroft as well.
Yeah, so Lachie Neale, third time someone's had those sort of 17 disposals, 7 clearances and a goal in a half of a grand final. So just the third player to do that, but sort of the only one, obviously, to be starting sub and come on and do that in the second half. I sort of compared those two games. Like, I thought he was, had a brilliant game, but again, I just given the 3 votes to Will Ashcroft when I did mine. And I was just going to go through, I'll just get the stats up here for the second half. Because, we're talking about how special Lachie Neale's performance was because he came from the sub. But if you look at, their 2 stats. So we'll go Lachie Neale's numbers first. So Lachie Neale had 17 disposals, 7 clearances, 6 contested possessions and a goal. Will Ashcroft in that same time had 15 disposals, 7 contested possessions, so 1 more than Lachie Neale, 6 clearances, 1 less than Lachie Neale, 1 goal as well. They both had 3 score assists, they both had 7 score involvements, but both had 3 tackles. So Will Ashcroft and Lachie Neale's numbers are almost identical. Lachie Neale plus 1 clearance and plus 2 disposals. I just find it funny that, a few people are going, well, Will Ashcroft wasn't that great. How good was Lachie Neale's second half? Well, they always had identical second halves. It's just that Will Ashcroft had worked his way into it from the first half.
Yeah.
I don't think we're saying he's not a deserving winner. Obviously,
no, absolutely not.
But I think your point before was that Cameron missing out on any vote.
For me, it was more weird that Cameron got nothing than Ashcroft won. But when Luke Hodge was walking up there to announce it, I was expecting Ashcroft to win it. But I was very surprised when I saw the voting afterwards, and it's like, Cameron didn't get a vote? I thought that was very surprising to me.
Just on Lachie Neale, I'll put my hand up because I was very sceptical of rolling the dice on something like that. So 22 days prior, when you do a calf, it's supposed to be a 40-day injury is what they say. I mean, Fagan said as much in the post-game press conference. He basically said he was very, very nervous about it. And if it had gone the other way, he would have been having nightmares for weeks, basically. He'd played 1.5 games in 56 days, if you put it into context that way. So before he had that layoff prior to the qualifying final, came back, played about a game. And then was sort of taken off with a few minutes to go because the game was over, and then had another couple of weeks off. So he hadn't played a lot of footy, so it could have gone drastically wrong, but the Lions rolled the dice and it worked out beautifully for them. And I don't know, would you have rather, this is the question that I like to come up with, is why wouldn't you start him and sub him out instead of bring him on? Because he could have been on in the first 5 minutes if something had gone wrong. He
could have, and I still think I think they would have known, if you're going to play, we need to know that worst case scenario, you're going to be able to play the whole game if we have an injury in the first minute. And I think that was ticked off. I think the plan always was going to be, you're more than likely, assuming we don't have any early injury, you're coming on at half time and you're playing a half at full tilt. And I think the reason you do it that way and not the other way is quite simply the game's won in the second half. You want him there for the last minute of the game if the scores are tied and you need to score or whatever it is. The game's won in the second half. Not that it isn't won in the first half, but the fact that he was able to come on at half time and the scores basically be 0-0. It's we're basically playing a half game now and you've been able to sit on the bench for the whole time. That's a massive win for Brisbane. They would have taken that any day of the week.
Two of my favourite things this final series has been, and the Josh Kelly sub would have been bigger had Giants got over the line that first week against Hawthorn.
Bringing him on at about half-time.
But how well he played in that third quarter was one of the better quarters of anyone in this final series. And Lachie Neale, the same sort of thing that second half. That ability to actually use a valuable player as a sub, it's hard to sort of go, okay, we're only going to use Josh Kelly for half a game. But as the Giants, as Brisbane, as Geelong could have done as well, there's not a lot of games in the last 3 or 4 years where either of those teams are out of the game at halftime. They're great sides. Most of their games go all four, through for all 4 quarters before you can actually get it. If not, Brisbane are the ones that put their foot down and sort of kick away. So you back yourself to be in the game at halftime, which I think Giants and Lions did, and said, well, when the game's up for balance in the second half, what do we want? Do we want to bring on a Sam Marshall or a Bruce Verville, who's sort of a bit player and has one sort of, has maybe one or two.
It's also very hard for them to be like, all right, go and impact now.
Yeah, and figure out the pace of the game. Whereas someone like Lachie Neale, Josh Kelly used to love it when Sean Burgoyne was the one for Hawthorn. Those are the types of the substitute, and probably sad that, I don't know, we may discuss this further on, but if the sub does sort of go away and we get rid of it for next year, I'd actually be sad because I think some coaches are starting to actually work out, no, it's not our 23rd best player that we need to make a sub.
Yeah.
It's our 4th or 5th best midfielder that we can maybe live without for 2 quarters.
Yeah.
Scott Pendlebury could play 12 or 13 games as a sub next year and be very good at it. It could be Scott Pendlebury still side bottom, switching sub roles every week. How often is Collingwood in the game in the third quarter? We know so many games of Collingwood are decided in that last quarter. To have Scott Pendlebury come on and be fit for
and he
can
still come in if worst case if he has to come on in 5 minutes.
But you're bringing these guys in the second half. I think there's a lot more smarts can be put around the sub, and I've really enjoyed what I've seen with Lachie Neale and Josh Kelly, which have been forced because of injuries and probably the coach has been a bit iffy of if they'll make it through the games. Both have been really successful in my books.
That's fair. Just on Neale, before we move on to some players from the other side, but just on Neale, what's his legacy looking like now, Jake? You're one of his biggest fans, and unabashedly so. I mean, you are one of Lachie's biggest supporters. You have been for a long time. What do you sort of think about where he sort of stands now in terms of the modern greats? I mean, if I look at this, listen to this sort of stat line or his achievements. 2 times premiership captain, co-captain to be fair, 2 times Brownlow, 4 times All-Australian, 6 best and fairest, 1 MVP and 1 coach's award. I mean, that's an impressive resume, whichever one.
And the 6 BNFs, it's multiple BNFs for 2 clubs as well.
Yeah.
That's surprising as well.
With a lot of star players to contend with as well for those best and fairest. You did play with Nat Fyfe, don't forget. Lachie Neale is banging on the door of legend status is revered and very difficult to reach that mark. He is as close as any any player of the last 25 years that we don't look at and say already they're 100% a legend. We know Gary Ablett is going to be a legend. Dustin Martin probably going to be a legend, I think. Buddy Franklin, legend. Put them there. He's the next player of the last 25 years. His resume is extraordinary, what he's been able to do. It's the list of two-time Brownlow medalists and two-time premiership captains is Lachie Neale and Dick Reynolds, and that's it, full stop. There's no one
Does
else.
he get a half point for being a co-captain? Can you split him and say it's a one-time?
Does Will Ashcroft get a half Norm Smith for probably winning it? Probably only winning half both times. I just think Lachie Neale I think I said it probably this time 12 months ago. I think he continues to be underrated. I don't know if he will be anymore. I think people truly realise how great a player he is. And I think just his Brisbane career, I mean, we can talk about his All-Australians, his best and fairest at Freo and all of that. But if you just look at his Brisbane career of 7 years, I believe, it's extraordinary what he's achieved in seven years there. He's about to play his 300th game. I just think when it's all said and done, people are going to look back on this guy's career and say, God, did we celebrate him enough? Did he get as much love as he probably should have? And now let me ask you this. It's hard to go back in footy history, but let's say the last 25 years. Let's go since 2000. Is there a player that you can 100% say, not who's better, whose resume would you rather? Who has a better resume, undoubtedly, than Lachie Neale?
Dusty.
Dusty's one for me.
Buddy, maybe. I mean, 2 flags and 1,000 goals is pretty impressive. Gary Ablett's is right up there. I mean, these are names that you mentioned already. So. Yeah, I mean, not many. Probably definitely less than 10, maybe less than 5.
I'm not going to argue with you if people turn around and say Gary Ablett's a better player than Lachie Neale. I'm not going to argue that. But I'm also going to say, well, show me the glaring differences on the resume.
You could look at Trent Cotchin or Jason Castagna or Jack Revolt, some of these guys as well, in terms of resumes and flag wins, in terms of having great numbers and 3 times flag winner and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's more than just
It's
how many involved. It's more than just counting how many premierships you've won. It's premierships as captain. It's Brownlow medals. It's all Australians. It's all of the accolades.
Fair enough.
It's everything, and I just don't think I just don't think there are really that many that you can say many players that you can definitively say I would take that resume over him.
And we talk about when he did join the club, so it was 2019, and we sort of looked at Brisbane's numbers as the team that he's been a part of since he joined. So the team that he plays for, Brisbane, they've won the most home and away games of any team since 2019. So 107 home and away game wins. They won the most finals of any team now. So even going into the grand final yesterday, they'd won the most finals of any team since 2019. Played the most finals of anyone since 2019, had the most wins, including finals and home and away. So they're number one in terms of just winning games since he's been at the club.
Played in the most finals, played in the most grand finals, won the equal most grand finals now in that time. So
well, let's sort of transition. I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but what does this sort of say for Brisbane under Chris Fagan and the dynasty status and his legacy as it's currently unfolding? I mean, some of those numbers, the most winningest team over the past 7 years. I mean, there's been some great teams. We've had Richmond, Geelong obviously been up there. Swans have been up there. There've been some really great teams, but this is a team that just consistently keeps winning.
And there's probably for me, there's been two or three recent examples of this as well. It's patience in footy pays off. So you talk about Geelong, what they went through before they went on their run with Bomber Thompson and the review. Damien Hardwick's gone through the very famous Richmond review. Brisbane's probably the same. It was the go-home 5. It was 2017, 2018 was when they sort of moved on from... Had Voss as coach and had Lepic in for a very short time and then brought in Fagan. And there was a lot of transition, but that stability at the club since 2019, since Lachie Neale's been there, I think Jake will take us through some of the recruiting that they've been able to bring in that time. But it's guys like Danny Daly, Chris Fagan, Greg Swan, who was there for so long, Lee Matthews on the board and some of his other board members. As a club, I don't want to take away from, I think we're going to talk about Chris Fagan and where he ranks as a coach, but I look at it more as just that club was able to sort of bandy together. And I've said this so many times on the podcast, I still go back to when we first started the podcast, one of our big topics that we were speaking about for the first 3 weeks was the death of football, the death of Queensland footy. Yeah. The Gold Coast Suns had gone nowhere and Brisbane were falling fast. Brisbane, they're not just stuck fat, they've actually turned that place around. They've sort of, brought in, made it a destination club after being everyone wanting to leave the club. I think it's just a great piece you look at Carlton, Melbourne, I don't know, maybe St Kilda, those guys, to really think about, it's the patience and the longevity that you've got to play. You can't just keep throwing board members or coaches out and, moving it around. You've got to find that right piece and you've got to stick by them for long enough to get through it, because the same thing, Fagan was losing 2 or 3 prelims when he first started, and I think people were saying 2023, maybe it's time for Fagan to go. He can't just get them to the next level.
I think they had at one point, his finals record was 1-6.
Yeah.
A couple of straight sets in there as well. Everyone was going, well, maybe this team's just not good enough. Is the window going to start closing?
But surely they're sitting there saying, hey, we're getting there. Look where we were 3 years ago, and we're getting there.
With the process, I think you're right. I really love what Chris Fagan's been able to do, and obviously he's the guy at the head of it all. He's the coach. But the whole club approach that Brisbane has done after that go-home 5 over the last decade has been incredible. I mean, the place is... we used to watch Gabba games on TV where there'd be 12,000 people in attendance, 14,000 people in attendance. I've been to the Gabba a few times. It's one of the loudest stadiums with rusted-on fans, and they continue to show up. And of course, that might change if they do have a lean patch. I mean, all clubs do, but they're not going to get to those lows again. They have sustainably built an organisation which is successful and has right people in right places.
That's it, and they've built it, and they haven't tried to rush it. It's just been built methodically. They've taken play. They've drafted really well. And people will say, "Oh, they've been very fortunate." They have been.
Yeah.
They're not going to deny that they have been, but they've also been very shrewd with the actual picks that they've had. That they haven't had father, sons, or academy prospects, and what they've been able to do in the trade period. So when Chris Fagan took over in 2017, that previous off-season, the 2016 draft, they took Hugh McCluggage and Jared Berry. The following year, they took Rainer Bailey Starcevic in the draft, like tick, 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 and they bring in Charlie Cameron through the trade period. The following year, they bring in Lachie Neale. The following year, they bring in Calamar. So it's a case of we're adding each year. It's not like St Kilda, not to have a go at St Kilda. It's not we're going to try and do everything in one off season and just hope that it works. We're going to plug holes, we're going to take what we can get, and we're going to build, and that's what they're able to do. Then you look at the players that they've brought in the draft of the last, and this is the thing that blows my mind. There were 8 players playing yesterday for Brisbane that were drafted by Brisbane since 2021. More than a third of their team were kids that have been drafted in the last 4 years. Wilmot, Lohman, Ashcroft, Fletcher, Morris, Marshall, Gallup. All drafted in the last 4 years. Yes, again, I understand. Some of them have been father, sons, some of them have been academy players. That is an extraordinary...
But the hit rate is undeniable.
It's just about 100%. Then you can throw in other players that have been brought in the trade period the last few years as well. Darcy Ford and then Josh Dunkley in 2022, who now, friend of the pod. But tell you what, he's built a pretty nice resume himself.
But even like the little ones, the little wins in there as well is Josh Dunkley. He wanted to go to Essendon. Was it the year before? Or was it 2 years before?
And the deal came right down to the wire.
And the deal couldn't get done. And we're not privy to it all. But it was basically, I think Essendon couldn't appease the Bulldogs. Brisbane were able to come to the table. They were able to move. That off season, they were able to sort of move in Josh Dunkley and all the draft points that they needed to get Ashcroft that year as well. Ashcroft and Marshall or Jasper Fletcher. I can't remember. Okay. I think it might have been Jasper Fletcher that year. That one off season, they sort of just were able to make so many manoeuvres by just saying, well, we need to come to the table. We can't just try to take everything from all the other clubs. We need to come. They gave a first round draft pick to get Dunkley across and things like that. But it's sort of just the difference of some clubs they know what they want, but they don't know what they want to give up. Brisbane obviously went, we want Dunkley, and we'll give up anything for him, but we sort of, and then they methodically, as we said, worked through it and had the draft points after that as well. So
it's been magnificent, and it's only going to get better and stronger. I mean, there's a consensus top 5 pick, Dan Annable, who's part of their academy, who will be picked up by them this year. Future years, there may be sort of tightening on how you can sort of bid for these academy and father sons and all that kind of stuff, but with all due respect to the rest of the competition, the Lions were working within the parameters set by the AFL at the time, and they have just nailed what they've done in that time. And you can't help but sort of tip the hat and say what an organisation they've been over the last, especially in the Fagan era, but this sort of last decade, it's just been remarkable.
You touched on it, but we know of the past 7 years, it's undeniable that they've been the gold standard. As you said before, they've won the most games, they've won the most finals, they've played in the most finals, they've won the equal most grand finals. They've done everything, and then you look at they've drafted well, they've traded well, they've done everything well. They've ticked every box. The scary part for the other 17 clubs is this might just be the beginning. It's definitely a dynasty. They could lose every game next year and trade all their players away and fold as a football club. This iteration of Brisbane, it's a dynasty already.
Well, they're a couple of straight kicks away from that's a three-peat.
Couple of straight kicks. They're a dubious, dodgy 50-50 advantage.
I subbed dubious out of that yard yesterday, by the way.
Away from being just the third team in 65 years to win 3 in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it's if, but you got to look at it. They lost that grand final by 4 points,
Yeah.
and then have come back and gone bang bang 2 in a row, and they're going to be favourite to win it again next year. So, tell me what all these players have in common. Andrews, McCluggage, Dunkley, Bailey, Rayner, Payne, Berry, Coleman. They're all 28 or younger. Like, you think these guys are older than they are. They're all young. And then you look at the other list of Fletcher, Marshall, Ashcroft, Wilmot, Lohman, Gallup, Morris. They're all going to start next year. None of them will be aged over 22. There's a third of their team.
It's crazy stuff.
Then we talk. Then you've mentioned some of the others that come in. What about Oscar Allen?
Yeah.
Yeah, he could walk in and be a 50-goal a season player easily. Hasn't played in a team that's had
And it's good timing as well, because while Ty Gallup, Morris has been a bit more consistent, but someone like Ty Gallup has sort of come in and played a decent role, had a quiet grand final, but was really good in the semi-final against the Suns, for instance. To kind of have another guy that the Lions, if Hipple comes back from injury as well, there's something depth there.
Hipwood's another one. I think he's 28, around that mark as well. But like, in all seriousness, and I understand he didn't play yesterday, but is he in their best team? If you are bringing these players in, and obviously what we know that they have,
That's a great question.
Is he getting into their best team? I don't know the answer to that.
Problem to have.
Really quickly, I'm sort of jumping around the run sheet here a little bit, but while we're just talking on the Lions, and before we do get to the Cats, and we will get to the Cats, we're going to grade. We've been grading every team's season, so we might as well grade the Lions. Is it anything other than an A+?
I don't know how it could.
Can we move on? Yeah, so we should talk about the Cats. The flip side of a performance like Neale's and Ashcroft's is someone like Patrick Dangerfield, who in the preliminary final was just about everywhere, had clearances coming out the wazoo, had 3 goals, had 35, just whatever it was.
I think it was widely acknowledged. It was one of the greatest preliminary final performances by anybody.
And it was clearly his best game for the year and one of his best games ever. But the grand final was unfortunately the complete opposite. So 10 disposals, 0 clearances, and just had very little impact. Brandon Starcevich was on him for most of the afternoon before he went off. And Dangerfield just couldn't get going.
Yeah, it was. So it was his 4th worst rated game just for this year, but it was the fact that he couldn't just get going, and it was the way he willed himself in. He had a bit of a slow. Well, Geelong as a team had a bit of a slow start against Hawthorn, and Dangerfield just sort of willed himself into the contest and just put himself in there. Just like looking at disposals quarter by quarter, he started with 4 in the first quarter, had 1, 3, and 2. So just never quite got
never had a big quarter.
Never impacted
but the one that
himself.
really stood out to me is his centre bounce attendances,
Yes.
and this is where we may never know, but I'm convinced that he must have had some sort of injury. Must have picked one up somewhere, whether it was the collision with Cameron, whether it was earlier than that, because the centre bounce stuff to me is just go and stand in there. So across the game, Brisbane finished with 4 goals, 3, 27 points from centre bounce clearances, which is the 4th most points from any team from centre bounces in a grand final. So they ended up dominating that later in the stages, 3 of those goals in the 4th quarter. But Dangerfield at centre bounces, 2 in the first quarter, 6 in the second, 0 in the third, and 1 in the third. So I think one in the 4th.
That can't
So we
happen.
looked at it. They had 21 centre bounces that you could possibly attend in the second half, and
was at
Dangerfield
1.
was at 1. So he wasn't even putting himself there. So it wasn't like he was just not able to will himself at the contest. He wasn't able to win the contest. He wasn't even there at the contest as often as he was the week before.
You weren't suggesting it, but you were sort of asking it, I guess. Was there an injury question mark or concern? Like, how else do you answer that? The biggest game, and after what he did last week, where he absolutely dominated in the middle and in the forward line, for him to not even be there, not have the opportunity to do it, I don't understand how that can happen. I can't imagine that's a coaching thing, saying, no, we don't want you in there. Especially when you're going up against, with all due respect to the Hawks. But we can all look at Brisbane's midfield group, especially when Lachie Neale comes on at half time.
Yeah, that was the other one. It was like you almost have to go and negate Lachie Neale.
How can we
better?
That was extraordinary to me. I don't know. I'm not speculating if there was an injury or whatnot, but just a really, really poor showing from Danger, which was disappointing considering how great he was last week, and you kind of don't want his prelim performance to be forgotten because everyone now focuses on what happened in the grand final.
Yep. One other talking point was sort of Jeremy Cameron's broken arm. So, there can be skill things. You can have a down day, but sometimes you can also just be unlucky. So clearly broke his arm in a contest with Dangerfield, actually. So they collided for the 2nd straight week, would you believe it, running for the same footy. And he came up looking really proppy and just was unable to affect the contest. Had a great one-handed tackle, But you're playing with, if you're playing with one arm behind your back, you're well behind. And there was a bit of drama there as well when he went down in the rooms, got it checked, got it strapped up, but he was ineffective.
What was he doing
as well.
on the ground with 3 minutes to go?
What was he doing on the ground?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Why is he on the field with 3 minutes to go?
Exactly.
It's a great question. I think it was very clearly broken somehow, whether it was a green stick fracture, a proper fracture, a break, this, that, the other. I mean, it was a bit weird to see, and Chris Scott had some weird comments after the game
That's
as well.
what frustrated
We'll touch on
me
those.
was, well, if we want to touch on them a bit later, but some of Chris Scott's comments was like, well, you left him out there. I could see that. I thought straight away when it happened that he'd broken his arm. My son's broken his arm twice. As soon as he had that collision with Dangerfield, you could see the way he was holding it, and the grip was like, he's broken. It's a chip bone or a broken bone, 100% right there. And then to sort of say we weren't sure if we were, it was like, no, what you were too scared to do is trade out your Coleman medalist.
Yeah. They froze. They froze
because he's got a broken arm.
He was off the ground, I think, for 16 minutes in the third quarter, and they still didn't make that change on I think it was Stanley in the end. They ended up pulling for Jack Martin, who ended up having one disposal.
It wasn't arm awareness. He had broken his arm.
So it was just a really weird. I think it was they just froze on the whole decision on what they do with the sub. They must have had a real watertight plan about what they wanted to do. Stanley being undercooked obviously hampered that, and then Jeremy Cameron having his broken arm obviously hampered that
but
as well.
But the whole point of a sub is
chaos.
you've got to expect to be flexible. You have to be.
Like Collingwood last week, it was 5 minutes into the game, they had to pull Scott Pendlebury. I mean, it's not
it's
not
like
a
the Neale
luxury.
thing. It's all well and good to say, all right, Lachie, you're coming on half time. Great, it worked out. But if, I know we're going to get to Starcevic in a second, but if he'd gone down in the first 2 minutes, you're going on now. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. You've got to be prepared for all scenarios. It can't just... And he was saying it wasn't sour grapes. It is sour grapes from Scotty. It is, 100%. Is he saying that if they win, the Cats?
I think he still would, yeah. But
he may still feel it, but I don't think he says it. But to be honest...
He's pretty forthright with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that you can plan all you want for the sub, but the sub's there as it's a
you just got to make the rule is the rule. You know the rule.
You can make a tactical sub.
Yeah.
But I think they just had a real horror sort of 10-15 minutes where they were. I don't think anyone knew what they were doing, and all the while that that was happening, the Lions were priming themselves for that push in that third and the fourth.
Surely the doctors can say, he has broken his arm. He shouldn't be going back out there.
So tactically, there was a bit of a few question marks over the Cats, but also skill-wise, their kicking inside 50, Christian, is something you wanted to bring to the table. The Cats just really couldn't sort of hit the targets and hit those deep targets that they're usually so much better at.
Yeah, so nearly every year, when the grand final comes around, there's a quirky stat where, I go all the way back to the 2008 grand final where Geelong, I think, were plus 20 inside 50s and lost that grand final to Hawthorn. It was like the first time ever. And then 2009, I'm sure it was something similar with St Kilda sort of dominating one area of the game, but Geelong winning and sort of saying, well, that's almost the first time someone's lost with those sort of numbers. This was sort of very different in terms of stacking up the two teams. There's a lot of evenness across these two teams of how they played. One thing that coming into the grand final that was clear differences was how clean Geelong was going inside 50. So their ability, especially on their kicks inside 50, they were retaining possession 54% of the time. One of only two teams over 50% of the time that they kick inside 50 that they get the next possession. Brisbane was 16th in that stat coming in at 45%. So they were happy just to scrounge it in there, maybe get it, we'll go out of bounds, we'll get a stoppage.
Yeah, famously a high inside 50 team.
Yep, and Hugh McCluggage, underrated, number one forward 50 clearance player this year. So you think about Isaac Rankin and some of the guys that get, watch this guy at the stoppage. Hugh McCluggage is actually really good at doing that. So Brisbane are happy to sort of force it in there any way they can. Get to the grand final. Geelong's retention is their third worst of any game this season. And Brisbane finished with their fourth highest of any game this season. But the interesting number for me for Geelong was they retained possession 43% of the time they went inside 50. So 43% of their kicks inside 50, they got the next possession. 43% of the time they kicked inside 50, Brisbane got the next possession as well. So it's only 4 games this year where Geelong's retention rate has either been even or worse than their loss rate. And another one of those 4 games was against Brisbane as well. So Brisbane's ability to sort of defend. But then I sort of noticed in the second, third quarter, Geelong taking marks or having the ball 70 metres out and chipping again to 60 and 55. Very unlike Geelong to sort of take that extra kick. There was a lot of times where they were called to play on or was gathers, or sometimes they weren't when they probably should have been. But they've never looked that sort of apprehensive when going inside 50. They usually find the target, find it very, very early. it crept into their game, and that's one thing I kept noticing when I was doing the game was about second or third quarter. I just said Geelong just don't want to kick inside 50.
So is that a coaching thing, or is that just the players as a collective just sort of trying to either play it safe or do something a bit different, and it just wasn't coming off?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. This grand final quirkiness of why was it the one day that it mattered? Why did it turn to crap on that day? I don't know. It was a little bit windy, and yes, Brisbane's got great defence, and as I said, it's twice that Brisbane have been able to do that to Geelong. But if you looked at the clear sort of what's one team got that the other team hasn't, it's Geelong's cleanliness going forward. That was completely lost, across the game.
A grade for the Cats. I know it's so hard because you make the grand final for the season, yeah.
Oh, I think if we're grading their season, it's got to be at least an A. I mean, hard to give an A+ when you end up, your last game is a loss by 47 points. But I think an A, definitely. They obviously exceeded my expectations, and I still think they exceeded the expectations of most Geelong fans even. I think if you said to Geelong fans, you'll be playing and scores will be tied and Cats will be at halftime of the grand final, I think Cats will be like, shit, take that.
We'll bite that cursed apple not knowing what happens in the second half.
I don't think there's any team that's not taking that.
No, true. But you know what I mean? I don't think Geelong fans were like, oh, we're going to steamroll this year. I think there was a case you could make where it was like, okay, is Geelong going to sort of fall off a bit? Are they still a little bit light through the midfield? Did people expect Jeremy Cameron to have a season where he was challenging for 100 goals?
Yeah.
I don't think so. So I think overall, and you can look at some of the players, and some of the players, not going to go through them all, but some of the younger players sort of, I don't want to say froze, but probably didn't play as well as we've seen them throughout the home and away season and other finals.
10 Geelong players playing in their first grand final.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, they obviously won it a couple of years ago, 3 years ago.
But it's a very different team.
It's a very different team. So
and I think
there's that evolution of that team as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like they've stood on their toes. And
we were focusing on Brisbane and the youth that they have, but the Cats have obviously done a great job of bringing in young talent as well. So I think overall it's a massive tick for the Cats this season. As I said, they've definitely exceeded my expectations by making it to the grand final.
Yes.
And I think that's fair enough. I think anything lower than an A is a bit unfair for the Cats.